So thanks everyone for joining us today. We are excited to talk about Black Oscars from Mammy to Minnie, what the Academy Awards tell us about African Americans with author Frederick Gooding. If you have questions about our discussion, you can post them in the chat box and we'll get to them at the end of the program. So let me start by introducing Dr. Gooding. He is an associate professor with the Honors College at TCU. He critically analyzes race with mainstream media, effectively contextualizing problematic issues patterned upon their historical roots. As such, his best-known work thus far is You Mean There's Race in My Movie, the complete guide to understanding race in mainstream Hollywood, which has been utilized in high schools and universities nationwide. His latest work, Black Oscar, expands his reach into cultural studies by analyzing African American Academy Award winners and how their narratives reflect and reinforce the larger American history. So thank you for coming. We're so glad to have you. I'm going to turn off my camera and my microphone so you can do your presentation, and then I'll come back in at the end and we'll do questions.
That sounds like a plan. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for all the attendees for joining us this evening, as we're going to talk about something that is so very important, and that would, of course, be the movies. And why are the movies so important? Well, it's because everyone loves the movies. That's why. And so allow me to preface my comments by stating at the very onset that while I am indeed critical of Hollywood and various aspects of the Academy, it doesn't mean that I don't love the movies. In fact, I wouldn't spend as much time watching the movies and analyzing them if I didn't actually care about them. So consider yourselves lucky. You have two of the hottest tickets in town for tonight. And what we're going to do is simply take a look at what's already there, but maybe perhaps hidden in plain sight. And so our talk this evening will follow a traditional 3-act structure as common with many plays or movies. So we'll have an introduction, conflict and climax, and finally, resolution. So, introduction. I thought, given the topic, it would be appropriate to invoke an Academy Award winner to help us get started with our training day.
Why did you do this to me?
You're an adult, man. Shit, nobody told you to smoke that. Made a decision, live with your decision. Ain't like I put a gun to your head.
Now, hopefully, you will not find me as menacing as Alonzo Harris, the character played by Denzel Washington in his Academy Award-winning role for Training Day 2004. But I will play bad cop by telling you that for any movie that I do end up discussing, I will reveal key plot points in order to analyze the movie properly. So let's go back to the very beginning. Who is Mammy? Let's recall the full title of the book. It's a mouthful, but it's Black Oscars, from Mammy to Minnie, what do the Academy Awards tell us about African Americans? ? So who is Mammy? Mammy is the name of a movie character that won an Academy Award back in 1939 for Gone with the Wind. Yes, that's correct, Gone with the Wind. The role was played by Hattie McDaniel. And so just a couple of details to point out before we move forward is that, remember, when I say Mammy, that was the way the character was listed in the credits. So it wasn't like Haley, the Mammy, or Haley Jackson, and then we watch the movie and then understand that by her function in the movie that she played the role of Mammy. No, her name is Mammy. So arguably, while she's a human being on screen, she might have ideas, thoughts, feelings as a human being, but notice how she's depersonalized. She's just called Mammy, right? In contrast, look at Rhett Butler. He's not listed in the credits as the gambler, right? And so just bear that in mind, because what's fascinating is when we ask the question, who is Minnie, this appears to pose a bit more difficulty to my audiences. So if I were to ask you, who is Minnie, who would you say? Because she too refers to an Academy Award-winning role. The role came out, the Academy Award was garnered for this role in 2011, and it was played by Octavia Spencer. Does anyone recall what that is? that would be Octavia Spencer's Best Supporting Actress role for The Help. So notice how when we say The Help, how similar to Mammy, this is depersonalizing the individual, right? The help. I mean, can you hand me the phone? Can you hand me the remote? Can you hand me the spoon? Oh, here's the help, right? So let's not overlook that detail. But more importantly, the question I wish to ask is if Black people, or Black women in particular, are winning Academy Awards for portraying subjugated Black made roles on film, on screen, then what does that tell us about the value and visibility of African Americans if they're still winning awards for playing subjugated maids on screen over 70 years apart? So, Dr. G, but it's just an Oscar. I mean, come on, right? I mean, let's not make this too big a deal. I hear what you're saying. It's just an Oscar, and I don't watch every award show out there either, right? So while the award show of the Academy Awards may not be a big deal to you, it's not to mean that they're not a big deal. And what do I mean by that? Well, quite simply, the Academy Awards are only televised in over 255 countries. And if you wish to advertise during the Academy Awards, you'll need to pony up at least $3 to $5 million for a 30-second slot. And not to be rude and temperate or indelicate, but for many of us in this session right now watching, I mean, it would be nice to see $3 to $5 million over our lifetime, let alone 30 seconds, right? And so that means that a lot of eyes are watching, right? I mean, the Oscars are only the second most televised and watched program behind the Super Bowl on the planet. So Oscars may not be a big deal to you, but they are indeed a big deal. So it only behooves us to ask the question, what are people watching? So if you go to your local public library and support the public library, you will be able to check out the book and read in more detail many of the patterns that are based upon archetypes, right? And I go into more detail about the archetypes in one of my prior writings. You mean there's race in my movie. But for the purposes of our talk tonight, I wish to stay supremely focused on the actual Oscars themselves. And so what I gift to use is a rubric, a 5-pronged rubric by which we can measure the quality of many of these roles, okay? So where did this rubric come from? Well, quite simply, when I was out researching at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, I had the good fortune to strike up conversation with a librarian, and one thing led to another, and lo and behold, I end up with an Oscar statuette in my hand. Right, you know, I'm looking at it. Why didn't I take a picture? Yes, Dr. G. Well, because you have to put your cell phone in lockers and all that. So it lives on in my mind. It does, right? So very cool. Fun fact, they're actually pretty heavy, a lot heavier than what you think. Second fun fact, I'm looking at the Oscar, scrutinizing it. That's what I do. And I look at things, I try to pay attention, and I noticed these circles that you see at the bottom. And I asked the librarian, I'm like, hey, what's up with these circles? Do they mean anything? And the librarian's like, yes, they do. And that's where I learned that they represent the 5 original branches of movie making. And this is what the creators of the Academy Awards wanted to do. They wanted to recognize those within the industry as a way to protect the industry itself, right? So, Eureka. I said, you know what? Then what I'll do is, similarly, I will have 5 key angles by which we can analyze the quality of Black roles that we see on screen. Because quality is so very important, y'all, because numbers are limited. Now, quantitative analysis tells us a story, but only perhaps part of the story, which is what I'm suggesting to use. I'll share with you the numbers about the total nominees and the total wins in just a little bit. But for now, I really want us to stay focused on the quality of these Academy Award winning or nominated roles.
So what did I miss? What did I miss?
Oh, okay. One more detail before we move forward to the next act, and that would be Hollywood began in what we would call racism. But Dr. G, how can you say something like that? Oh, easily. Let's just look at the facts. So can anyone remember the first mainstream movie? It's considered the godmother of all mainstream movies based upon its cinematography, the pacing, the editing, the cutting, in contrast to the silent films of old. Well, if you guessed The Birth of a Nation, 1915, directed by D.W. Griffith, you would be correct. And so, why do I call this movie racist? Well, a couple little details. One is that the KKK in this movie literally rides in on high horses to save our white damsel in distress. So let's just rewind for a second. A couple of fun facts about our KKK here. KKK heroes, that is. KKK stands for Ku Klux Klan, and essentially they were started immediately after the Civil War by a group of jilted Confederate soldiers who wanted to keep alive this idea of the lost cause, right? And they, more importantly, wanted to keep the Negro in their place. And so what's no secret is that don't let the smooth taste fool you, even though you might see a section of the highway is maintained and cared by the KKK. The fact of the matter is that they've engaged in a number of unspeakable, heinous, dastardly, violent actions that we would now categorize as domestic terrorism. I don't know how else to describe it to you. When you bomb churches and when you burn crosses on lawns and other acts that we won't spend time hashing out here, that's called domestic terrorism. And mind you that the KKK was premised on this idea of hate, right? That other people just weren't good enough. And therefore, even though they clean up the trash on highways, they just felt that anyone who wasn't white was actually trash themselves, right? Difficult concept to reconcile with, right? But that's who the heroes of this movie is, right? As shown in the White House. Woodrow Wilson called it a flash of white lightning. But the second part that I want to also point out about The Birth of a Nation is that they save our white damsel from distress, right? So why is our white damsel in distress? Well, she's in distress because of the lascivious, licentious, lustful, I guess, machinations of this black male who wanted to get her. Wasn't actually a black male, it was a white male in blackface. And blackface, ladies and gentlemen, is racist. So that reminds me of the first talking picture that Hollywood produced, right? For those of you who saw Singing in the Rain, remember that? No, yes. Remember that scene? I mean, they were making fun of the idea of, the difficulty in being able to merge the audio with the video. And so that was a new concept back then. But so 1927, you have The Jazz Singer. It's the first talking picture. So that's great. It's of historical significance. And so that's why many film schools still screen it today because of its historical significance. But when you look at the content, look very carefully. That's not a bad tan. That is called blackface. So Al Jolson, even though he's the plot line of the story is he's a Jewish male who his family wanted him to be a cantor, right? I mean, his family wanted him to sing for religious purposes, but no, he didn't want that. He wanted to make it in show business. And so, unfortunately, even though he's a member of a group of people who've been ostracized and discriminated against, right? He still somehow thought it would be funny, I guess, or entertaining to put, it's usually black shoe polish or burnt cork around the face and exaggerate the motions, like these perverted delusions about what a black person would sound like or look like, right? It was called minstrelsy. It was a very popular form of entertainment, stretching all the way into the 50s. And let's not forget that people it wasn't just limited to white males, although mostly white males did it, including people like Fred Astaire, but Judy Garland and even Shirley Temple engaged in blackface at some point in their careers, right? So if you look very carefully around his mouth, the white around his mouth represents lips, right? Because I guess black people like me, it's kind of funny, I guess, that people like me are supposed to be made fun of because our lips are so large. And the only thing I'll say about that is I have indeed been made fun of when I was younger. I don't want you to cry for me, sniff, sniff. But people have made fun of the size of my lips, right? When I was younger, and here Al Jolson is doing the exact same thing. But what's so funny is now we have the Kim K package. Now we have the Kylie package. Kylie Jenner, of course. And so now, my lips, now it's not fat. Now they're full, right? So when you inject collagen into a white woman's lips, like they're full and it's awesome and it's great and it's, it's attractive. But yet when black people like me actually have black lips or full, lips, and then it's something different. It's kind of confusing. I don't know. Maybe you can make sense of it for me in the Q&A. But the fact of the matter is that we're not necessarily out of the woods yet. I mean, when we think about blackface, let's not forget that Robert Downey Jr., aka Iron Man, was nominated for an Academy Award in 2009 for playing the role of a Black male in blackface. So if racism were a train that left Hollywood Station, say back in 1915, the question for us is, when did this train become derailed? Act 2, conflict and climax. So for this section, I thought that there's nothing like you seeing it for yourself. So I thought I would at least take one example of an Academy Award winning movie, so we could parse out a little bit more of these questions about quality, and then we'll come full circle with the Oscars analysis, and I'll show you the numbers that I promised earlier. So let's sally forth, shall we? So the book, well, the movie was actually optioned off of a book that was written by Catherine Stockett. And Catherine Stockett stated that Aibileen, as played by Viola Davis, was a heroine, right? She's intelligent, she's an author, of course, a devoted servant of the Lord, and a good mother. So I thought this statement was quite fascinating. And so I just said, and I thought, and I said, good mother, But good mother to who? Well, I guess was the question I had, right? And maybe you know the answer to this. But, what's fascinating is the movie that I saw, maybe you saw a different version, but the movie that I saw, when I think about mothering on screen, I do recall Octavia Spencer's character, right? Minnie, I do recall her being a mother to her child. And notice, in contrast to, say, movies that, I don't know, like feature, white kids coming of age who are like out cavorting and gallivanting with dinosaurs or what have you, just in contrast to that, notice the symbology and the messaging here of this teenager coming of age and the mother telling her that take your dreams, aspirations, thoughts, feelings, and put them in a box. And what I want you to do is learn how to take care of other people, right? Other people who, I guess, have it going on so great that they can't take care of themselves. I mean, they're in charge of everything and have all these resources, but yet they can't take care of themselves. I want you to take care of them, right? And make sure you say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and things of that nature, right? So that's interesting. That's not a message I tell my kids, right? I tell them that you should, explore your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings. You should explore. You should go to the library and read and, think and, think about a way where you can contribute, as opposed to, you just going in to take care of somebody else, right? That's not the message I deliver. Maybe you deliver a message to your kids. I'm not sure. But moving right along, I'm still trying to think.
You is kind, you is smart, you is important, you is smart, you is kind, you is important. Oh, that's so good.
This is the only evidence I was able to find of Aibileen being a mother, because while she was a mother, or is a mother, she recounts this tragic story whereby her son was taken from her, right, prematurely. And we never saw her child on screen, right? So, it just had me start to think about this idea of, well, who does a movie like The Help actually help, right? And so continuing along the vein, you don't have to take my word for it in terms of me being too critical. Well, let's just take it from, remember, I wasn't there, I wasn't on set, but let's take it from somebody who was there, who was on set, and that would be Viola Davis. If you notice, she said that she actually regrets her role in The Help, right? She just felt that at the end of the day, the voices weren't being heard. And mind you, this is in 2018, right? So some of us might be wondering, oh, well, Dr. G, well, maybe it's just because the summer of social justice. Everyone became woke during the summer of social justice, as you know. And for those who may not know exactly what I'm referring to, summer social justice refers to summer 2020 that began in the aftermath of May 25th, 2020. What happened on May 25th, 2020? Well, that was the day where an officer by the name of Derek Chauvin decided that it was legal or within his power and control to keep his knee on the neck of an unarmed, handcuffed Black male named George Floyd, who was lying prostrate in the stomach. Despite admonitions from the crowd, hey, bro, what are you doing? You're on his neck. He did not move. And George Floyd is no longer with us as a result. And so what was fascinating was how, as a result of that inexplicable and indefensible death, many people became woke, right? Many corporations, started celebrating Juneteenth, from Beth Bath & Beyond to Chase Bank, right? They're sending me emails about how we observe Juneteenth. It's fascinating. I mean, as long as I've been making the Chase, no disrespect, they haven't celebrated Juneteenth before, but it's just amazing, like all these people just, becoming woke, and people asking me for, book reading lists and things of that nature, like, oh, what should I do? And that sort of deal. But my point is this, I mean, Viola Davis had this epiphany before that summer, right? So, and I wonder why she would say that, right? That's idea that the voices of the Black maids weren't heard. Well, maybe it's because she saw the movie I saw. Maybe you saw a different movie, but the movie that I saw, arguably, Emma Watson was the protagonist. The white female you see in your left-hand corner there, right? She played the role of Skeeter. And if I recall the movie that I saw, Skeeter was able to negotiate eye to eye with white male and create an opportunity for herself. It was an advice column that she started off with, right? She just graduated and she wanted to gain, she was seeking gainful employment as a writer. She wanted validation that, I'm a writer, I have a thought. I'm sorry, excuse the expression. I have thoughts, ideas, feelings, right? That idea, right? Okay, so aspirations, let's not forget. Thoughts, ideas, feelings, aspirations. There we go. So she then leverages / uses Aibileen, the help, for the advice column. I mean, don't you recall the scene where Skeeter was sitting down comfortably and Aibileen was, putting up the laundry over the laundry line. Okay, and then she was able to leverage / use the advice column to land herself a book deal, right? Then she leveraged / used the voices of the Black maids to then publish the book, and then leverage / used that book to create a career pathway in New York. And she was able to leave the state of Mississippi and, pursue her writing pursuits with what we received the impression of was a feminist thinking publisher, a woman in New York, by which she was able to maybe explore her talents. All the while, she was able to reconcile with her love life. Then I didn't say they lived happily ever after, but she was able to reconcile with her love life. And more importantly, she was able to reconcile with her mother, right? Because apparently they had some sort of dispute based upon the mother's use of the help, as played by Cicely Tyson. So the point is this: when you look at the character arc of Emma Watson, Skeeter, it is off the charts, right? Compare that to the character arcs of Aibileen and Minnie. You see here in the right-hand side. It is a fact that both Black women ended their last scenes on screen in maid outfits. So what does that mean? Well, here's the deal. While it was hinted, Dr. G, I mean, you're being a little bit too harsh. Dr. G, remember, Aibileen was supposed to be an author. Remember that? No, you're right. You're right. She was supposed to be an author. I just didn't see her become an author on screen the way I did with Skeeter. That's all I'm saying. Maybe you saw the remix version, the extended edit, the cuts or something. I don't know. Just the movie I saw in the theater. I saw her walking down the street saying, I might become an author, but I didn't see it manifest. Then let's turn to Minnie. Oh, we're supposed to be happy because she's sharing fried chicken cooking duties with her mistress. Okay, that's all good. But my question is, after they're done with the meal, who does the dishes? Oh, Dr. G, everybody's in a good mood. Okay, that's great. What about the next day? Who's going to prep the meal and do the dishes? You get the point. Black female subjugation, I don't think has really been fully challenged or substantially changed in any meaningful way with this movie, right? Two more things I want to say is that one piece is that, but Dr. G, what about the comeuppance? What about the terrible awful? Didn't she get her back with the terrible awful? I don't know. I mean, I know at the theater I saw a lot of people liked it and thought it was humorous. Upon reflection for me, when I thought about that scene, it struck me as a bit juvenile. And maybe it's because maybe I'm the victim of the man who knows too much. I'm a historian, right? But just when I know about the stories, and if you're curious, you should check out Isabel Wilkerson's Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Warmth of Other Suns. And she talks about Black women who were objectified and even, sexually victimized, right? This is before #MeToo, right? And the idea that so many strong Black women developed their agency in so many different ways, so many creative, strong, powerful ways. And for those of us who understand the history of Black women, I think it is much greater than resistance being boiled down to collecting fecal matter and mixing it with butter, sugar, eggs, and maybe a little vanilla extract. If you're telling me that's the only way that Black women could think to articulate their ideas, thoughts, and feelings about being subjugated in society, then I think it just cheapens the enterprise to a degree. It makes it a little bit juvenile, not to mention grotesque. So that's A. And then B is, but Dr. G, aren't you being a little bit harsh? It was a movie that was meant to bring people together. Well, the question is, but who? I mean, who does the help? Because the movie wasn't interesting to me, right? Because I get this comment all the time, but Dr. G, it was interesting. It was enlightening. It was informational when I checked it out. It's not enlightening or informational for me because I didn't have to pay for the privilege to poison myself, right? I didn't have to pay to watch a movie to learn. All I had to do is just ask my great aunt. All I had to do is ask my great aunt, yo, auntie, like, what was it like bending on your knees, cleaning a toilet with a toothbrush, right? All I had to do was just ask her, right? Sitting on her modest furniture with the plastic covering. Y'all remember that? Right? With the plastic covering, y'all remember that? It was scratchy. If you wear shorts, it scratch the edge. I don't know if y'all remember that. The plastic coverings, right? Because she was trying to preserve her. So all I had to do was ask her, what was it like serving cold food to your children at the end of the day when you were spending the bulk of your day preparing hot food to serve the other children? What was that like? So I don't have to watch a movie to be informed, right? Because the last thing I'll say about The Help before we move on, it's not a documentary. It's not a documentary. It's the product of fiction from a white woman's imagination. Catherine Stockett. It's not a documentary. Act 3. So what, right? So what? What's the big deal? All right, well, let me say this. Hollywood can't have it both ways. What do I mean by that? Let's talk about fantasy for a second. There's a movie called Ted, right? And again, I'm going to spoil the plot. But Ted was a flip on the idea of a teddy bear, right? Teddy bear is cuddly, it's usually inanimate, and it just sits around, doesn't do anything. It's nice, soft, furry, cuddly, great. Ted was a flip, they shortened the name, and he was walking, animated, he was able to drive, he was hard partying, hard charging, crass, foul mouth, right? It's supposed to be funny, but he was the product of Seth MacFarlane, right? Brainchild Seth MacFarlane, who created Family Guy. So in this movie, Ted apparently ends up becoming a wedge in between his owner, played by Mark Wahlberg, and his girlfriend. Mark Wahlberg's girlfriend is played by Mila Kunis. So they fight. One day, Ted gets ripped apart in half. Oh no. Mila Kunis feels remorseful, right? She feels horrible, right? I mean, this is like it's like it was her boyfriend's childhood friend, right? So she goes outside one night, looks up at the stars, and wishes that Ted would come back to life. Because it's a movie, he does. But that's not the point. Here's the point. The point is that when she looked up at the stars, this small school in Jersey, Princeton or whatever, sorry, I have a chip on my shoulder, I went to Georgetown. The small school in Jersey, whatever, confirmed that the stars that were shown on screen for it was 4 to 6 seconds. The stars that were shown on screen were a true and accurate depiction of Ursa Minor. Ursa Minor. So what's the catch? Ursa Minor, ladies and gentlemen, means little bear. Get it? Little bear. So which one is it? On one level, you're so detail-oriented, right? I mean, think about it, y'all. If we all right now, everyone right now, listen, if we all went outside tonight to look for the Big Dipper, half of us are going to have a problem finding the Big Dipper, right? And again, I was a scoutmaster for years. My son made eagle, right? So, I'm able to, look at Orion's belt, but that was about it. That was all I could do. When we started getting into the Sagittariuses, check out the Scorpion, I'm like, check out what? What are what are you saying? Like, huh? I mean, you had to work to see some of this stuff. Like, are you kidding me? So my point is that they can just show a number of stars on screen. It's no big deal, but they had to get the constellation just right, right? Okay, great. So you got that part right. And then on the flip side, you have no idea why the black guy dies first? Okay, so let's return back to our Oscars analysis. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know how much there is to talk about, right? I mean, 1.3% over 91 years. Sorry, I mean, that's why I kind of saved the numbers for last, right? I just don't know how much there is to talk about, right? Yeah, and these are the wins, right? Because there have been 77 total nominations over the course of 91 year period I studied. And then we're talking about 19 total wins, right? 19 total wins, right? Not much to talk about. And well, I guess I could say is that the 2.1% is still a gross underrepresentation. When you look at African Americans constituting roughly 13% of our nation's population, and African Americans are actually overrepresented at the box office. Did you know that they account for roughly 30% of box office sales, right? I mean, because, just think about how the idea of let's go downtown, pay for parking, buy tickets to the show, do dinner beforehand, do drinks afterwards. I mean, this adds up, right? And so for many of us who unfortunately have been restricted in our access to resources, a movie is a cost-effective way to entertain the family, right? And so we're actually overrepresented at the box office as far as Hollywood taking our money. But in terms of Hollywood investing into roles that reflect the audience, that's maybe perhaps an area of growth. So let's return back to those Black Oscar angles I had promised. And this 5-pronged rubric, I believe, will be very helpful as far as you moving forward and helping to evaluate the quality of the roles. We talked about the quantity. Clearly, we know that they're far and few between, right? Even despite the fact that 9 people of color were nominated this year. I mean, we still have a ways to go, right? Okay. And so let's talk about these Black Oscar angles, shall we? The first is Black non-American. So what's fascinating about this is that nearly a fifth of all Black Academy Award nominated individuals are not from America. Now they're Black, right? Because the African diaspora is quite expansive, reaching from the Caribbean, shout out TNT, jump up, to South America. I mean, there's obviously over 60 odd countries in the continent of Africa. Not a country. And Europe, all parts, right? But here's the point. My beef is not with the actual individual actors. I'm not here to disparage or impugn them. The fact that you're able to feed your family, God bless you. But my issue is with Hollywood, right? We're talking about the paucity of opportunity. So therefore, let's take a movie like Harriet. Harriet stars Cynthia Erivo. Cynthia Erivo is from the UK. And so what's so interesting about this is Harriet refers to Harriet Tubman. She's a distinctly African-American heroine. And what I mean by that is, it's not like she found the cure for cancer that is applicable to everyone worldwide. No, she was specifically in a geographic location called the United States of America that was premised upon racialized enslavement. And so she made 15 to 19 trips, ferreting 300 people to freedom, crossing the Canadian border with America. So I think what's so fascinating about that is distinctly American story, African-American heroine, and yet you're telling me that walking the streets of Los Angeles, California, we can't find an African-American actress who wants to play the role of Harriet? No, Dr. G, aren't you being xenophobic? No, because what's interesting is when you look at Churchill, they didn't have any problem finding a British actor for that, did they? Gary Oldman. Can you imagine? We're going to find a brother from Wichita, Kansas to play Winston Churchill. That didn't happen. But with Harriet, it did happen, right? And again, we're talking about the paucity of opportunity for African Americans to actually have the opportunity to reflect their image. Along those same lines, crossover. Over a third of all Black Academy Award nominees are not actors. They're Black movie stars, maybe, but they're not actors. And so this is Hollywood's shorthand in not taking the time to invest in A-list talent that's Black. So while Tom Cruise is known for jumping on late night talk show couches, he didn't jump out of the room as an A-list actor. He was developed over a period of time in a series of numerous vehicles and projects, right? And so what's fascinating is when you look at a third of all Black Oscar nominees, they're either crossover comedians or music stars or sports figures, right? And so say for example, like Ludacris and Tyrese in the Fast and Furious. It wasn't nominated, but the idea is that what Hollywood is essentially saying is, sure, you can become an actor. I can pack up my Prius and I can head to Hollywood tomorrow and I can be an actor, but my chances would improve if I become a platinum selling album first, right? If I have a platinum selling album, that will improve my chances first, right? As far as me bringing my audience to the theater, right? So again, we're talking about paucity of opportunity, right? For regular people who want to tell their regular stories or even extraordinary stories. Deja vu, along the same lines, 40% are repeats. We see this pattern manifested this year. Daniel Kaluuya receives another Academy Award nomination. Remember, he was nominated in Get Out. And Viola Davis becomes the most nominated Black female actress with Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And so again, it's not to impugn or disparage individuals who have skills, right? If they have acting chops, God bless you. God bless you. But the point is this: if Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, and Viola Davis are all in the same car and they get in a car accident, God help us all. That is half of our Black nominations right there, right? So in other words, when we talk about 77 nominations over the course of 91 years, we're not spreading the wealth, right? I mean, it's just like a small concentrated group. And this one arguably is the most important, gravity of reality, because over 80% of all Black Academy Award nominees deal with either poverty or racism. Poverty or racism. Poverty or racism. I mean, have you seen this movie before? The answer is yes. And so, in contrast, think about how while Blacks are grounded by the gravity of reality, in contrast, my white brothers and sisters are liberated by the freedom of fantasy. And if you want an example, here's a 15-second taste of what I'm talking about.
The power of imagination. The thrill of adventure. The journey will be electric. The Chevy Bolt.
Let's review, shall we? A, X-Wing fighters are not real, or at least not yet. And as a fanboy, it hurts me to say that, but those are the facts, right? Not yet, not yet. They don't exist, okay? Secondly, there's no way that a multi-million-dollar piece of military machinery, remember, it's an X-Wing fighter, not flyer, only has room for one person and a droid, is designed to shoot and kill. It's a piece of military equipment. It's not flying that close to the ground, y'all. Sorry, you're gonna risk injury to the pilot, damage the weaponry, etc. Or it's just not happening. You're not flying that close to the ground. C, no disrespect to American-made cars. I revealed myself and said I had a Prius. I don't have a predilection or preference, but understand what I'm saying. Chevy Bolt is just not that fast. I'm sorry, y'all. Hyperspace is more like hyperbole. Hyperbole. That is an exaggeration. The point is, it speaks to this idea of fantasy. So you can only imagine. I mean, that's just a 15-second commercial. I mean, think about the movies that have been made featuring, I don't know, blue people in Pandora, like Avatar. I don't know, or even just looking at, it doesn't have to go that far as Lord of the Rings or anything of that nature, but even this idea of Ted, that's a fantasy movie. I mean, do teddy bears really walk and talk and drive cars? Not that I know of. Or this idea that I'm able to gallivant and cavort with dinosaurs somewhere. And think about how, in contrast, how few roles you've seen featuring Black, Indigenous people of color who've had that same opportunity. Lastly, still in the struggle, I don't mean to laugh, y'all, but did you know that nearly a quarter of all Black Academy Award nominees die before the end of the movie? Wow. Okay, so here we are. All 19 Academy Award winners right here in front of us. I just want to give you a moment. Just soak on faces in. You might recognize many of these roles. You might have seen many of these movies. But you have to ask yourself, how many of these roles challenged the status quo? Substantively challenged the status quo. So in other words, are they awards or are they rewards for merely upholding the status quo? Because I think where the rubber hits the road, and this might, again, I'm not trying to come off as delicate, obtuse, or indifferent, but when I think of the two words power and control, very few roles I see in front of me exert power and control. Remember what we said earlier. There's a trial going on currently. where Derek Chauvin was so fearful of losing his power and control that he could not get up off a man's neck who was unarmed, right? You know the facts, but I have to repeat them. Unarmed, lying prostrate on his back, or on his stomach, handcuffed. Really? Really? So your need for power and control is so great. If you stand up, you still got the badge. If you stand up, he's still handcuffed. If you stand up and take your knee off his neck, he's still unarmed. If you stand up and take your knee off his neck, you still have the gun. You still have the law on your side. My 2 cents part of people is that unfortunate loss of life was due to this idea of power and control, or warped sense of it. And think about how many movie roles you've seen where these Black winners have exerted power control, let alone, God forbid, power control over a white person. Closest I've seen is Sidney Poitier slapping somebody in the heat of the night. He didn't get an Oscar for that. He won an Oscar for magically happening upon nuns. Get it? Nuns, as in there's none, nothing happening, no sexual tension. They're nuns, and he decides to build a church for them. Man, that's pretty nice, isn't it? Wow. In return for singing a couple hymns and moving on his way, wow, that's pretty great. Well, that's what he won an Oscar for. And again, think about this other pattern, the game within the game. The idea that whenever we have Blacks who are at the center of a movie as protagonists driving the action, it's typically what we call a pararealistic movie. So it also shows this idea of Hollywood's limited scope, whereby rather than invest in new innovative ideas, we're only going to bank upon existing true to life stories. Even though extraordinary stories, that's what we're going to bank upon. First row, fourth from the left, Glory, based upon a true story. Second row, fourth from the left, Ray, based upon a true story. Third row, first from the left, Last King of Scotland, based upon a true story, Idi Amin. And don't forget, they darkened Forrest Whitaker's skin to make him look more menacing. Back to the program. Third row, second from the left, Jennifer Hudson, Dreamgirls, based upon a true story. Third row, fifth from the left, Lupita Nyong'o, 12 Years a Slave, unfortunately, based upon a true story. Fourth row, third from the left, Dr. Shirley, Mahershala Ali, Green Book, based upon a true story. So the question is, number 20, will it break the pattern? So when we look at From Mammy to Minnie, from 1939 to 2011 and bleeding into our modern age, I think it just reminds us about that train I asked you about, right? The train that left the Hollywood station in 1915, has it been derailed, y'all? Has it been derailed? Or has it been refurbished, repurposed, remodeled? Understand what I'm saying? So as opposed to the lumbering, loud locomotive of old, that's not necessarily the monster we face as often, right? So think about, a burning cross, that's offensive, right? It's just, you're going to take my most sacred symbol, the cross. I believe in this thing, called, Christianity. I believe in God. And, you're going to take a sacred symbol and make it profane by burning it on my front lawn. That's offensive. Or the idea of lynching, right? The idea that you have a decaying dead body swinging in the breeze gently. I mean, this is the forbidden fruit that Billie Holiday sang about, of course. I mean, that's ugly. It's offensive. So rather than that, I caution you that the monster we face is much more subtle, much more suave, much more sophisticated. If you're looking for the Hooded Klansman, you're going to be looking probably for a longer period of time. I mean, obviously they take care of our highways, but you know what I'm saying. And so maybe perhaps the ideas of Blacks just not being valued, not just as visible, maybe the same ideas are just simply stylized in a sleeker, more slicker manner, like this new train. It's much more fuel efficient. If anything, it's faster, it's quieter. And above all, y'all, the ride is more comfortable, right? We enjoy the ride. And so what I'm challenging you to think about is, did that train get derailed, or is it still on track? And with that, our training day is complete.
Man,
So my next to last slide, Scout's Honor. Wait. Actually, speaking of movies and fantasy and cavorting and gallivanting with dinosaurs, we have an example right here in Jurassic World. Look at that rotating gyrosphere. Isn't that neat? Wouldn't that be neat to position and pilot? We have these two white males, maybe around the teenage years, coming of age, and here they are just exploring this brand new world, right? Wow, I wish I was in that movie, don't you? That looks awesome. But guess what? In order to create that, many of the people on set, many of the movie makers and producers had to see past reality. They had to imagine. They had to use their powers of imagination to create what we saw on screen. As you see in the lower right-hand corner, that's the reality. I don't see many dinosaurs in that lower right-hand corner, right? And I don't see a rotating gyrosphere either, right? Remember, the glass was rotating as it moved. I see wheels. I see 4 wheels. That's what was rotating, right? That was the reality. But this idea that Hollywood can do what it wants with the powers of imagination, right? Well, that's the question that I leave you with. Because I find it amazing as it is alarming that within the boundless expanse of our collective imagination, it still appears that when it comes to Black, Indigenous, and people of color, that Hollywood chronically suffers from a lack of imagination. But you see, one place where we're all the same, one place where we're all equal is at the box office. Hollywood will take all of our money just the same. But it appears to me, Dr. G, that even though we all pay the same price of admission, it is people of color, Blacks in particular, who disproportionately bear the costs of omission. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, my name is Dr. Frederick Gooding, Jr., aka Dr. G. Now that you've had a taste and a glimpse of the Black Oscars experience, may you never see movies the same way again. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to, there we go. Oops. Okay. So questions. So if you have questions, if you're in the audience and you have questions, you can post them in the chat. And I will start off. Can you talk about the research process for this book?
Oh yeah. You have to love movies to engage in this type of painstaking research, right? Because we're talking about at least 77 movies that I had to familiarize myself with, because my contribution, Jennifer, is that many books do talk about Oscar winners, but they'll usually spend a lot of time talking about the actual individual actor or actress, right? Oh, Louis Gossett Jr., he was born in Tennessee, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's great. But my contribution was to actually analyze the roles. So I had to be familiar with the actual characters, the roles, and their positionality to others on screen, because that's the key, right? When you take like a movie like, say, Fences, there is indeed complexity, right? There's indeed complicated Black characters, and that's a good thing, right? But the flips of that is it's what I call an insular movie, meaning that there's only Black people in the movie, right? And so what's fascinating is when you have Blacks sharing the screen with others, i.e. whites, ding, 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 that's when the hierarchy comes into play, right? You know, just magically, it just emerges, right? That's when the hierarchy comes into play in terms of what I was talking about earlier about power and control, right? You know, and so it took time to be able to do that type of research, not to mention the quantitative, the numbers, you know, even like little quirks, like the same number of nominees wasn't consistent throughout. They kept changing it, and being able to, you know, just track that down and be consistent and be thorough and be accurate. So, no, I mean, so I said that it's the labor of love. I mean, I am very much interested in movies. I think movies are a very powerful medium, Jennifer. I mean, and I don't think I'm alone in that presumption. I mean, after all, look at corporate America. You know, did you know, Jennifer? I mean, for example, let me give you a little mini test. What product do you think went up in sales after the movie E.T. came out?
Oh, Reese's Pieces.
Ding, 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 ding. Okay, right. So in other words, those tests were largely debunked because the control wasn't that large. I forget the name of the scientist, but the idea that he did these tests where you throw popcorn across the screen and all of a sudden people are like, you know what, I feel a salty taste. Let me get some, I'll be right back. Do you want anything in my mouth, right? This idea that movies could control our minds, not exactly, but Jennifer, there's something to be said about the influence, because why do you think we have ratings for our movies? Because we believe collectively, implicitly, we don't say it explicitly, but that if we expose our children to graphic nudity, sexuality, themes of violence at an early age, there's this potential for influence over time. So going back to what I was saying about the Reese's Pieces, the idea is that I don't think enough has been done to study and lock in that correlation, but we know for sure that sales of Reese's Pieces went up. How about, speaking of Jurassic World, what about Jurassic Park? Do you know what car sales went up? Do you know?
The Jeeps.
Right, the Ford Explorer. Ding, 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 ding. What about Men in Black?
Sunglasses.
The Ray-Bans. Ding, ding, ding. Right. And so it's gotten to the point where there's this correlation. Well, sales are going up. People are seeing it, being exposed to it, some correlation. So this idea that movies don't have any influence, I don't know about that. Think about how, Jennifer, for, those who are watching right now, maybe never met me, seen me from a can of paint before. But if I said Miracle on 34th Street, ding, we all have the same memory. Isn't that fascinating? Never met you before. You haven't been in the streets of Philadelphia with me. You haven't celebrated the Eagles winning the world championship a couple of years ago. I mean, you haven't done any of these things with me. But yeah, when I say Miracle on 34th Street, we're all there. It's the same memory. You didn't see a different version, and I saw, like the B version. No, it's the same. So movies can be this universal language that can bring us together in so many ways. So that's the powerful aspect of it. But the question is, but what are we watching though? And to the extent that these movies are rehashing some of these narratives about, lesser value and lesser visibility of African Americans in society, I think that's problematic. And I'm not saying that's the reason why Derek Chauvin didn't get up, but I mean, it may be a factor in this idea that maybe he's just never seen or been in a situation where he's had to take Black authority seriously. Like what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, right? I mean, he's just never, it's like cognitive dissonance. He's never understood Blacks outside of this box that's been, narrowly painted and framed.
So as part of this book, you kind of talk about the unholy trinity, right? That's part of a big part of your research process and your categorization. Can you talk about what that is and why it's an important part of the discussion regarding available roles in movie making?
Okay, so this is where the historian in me just could not sit on the sidelines and just watch the movies as a fan, right? And so I thought it was important to ground and contextualize our conversation, just like I kind of did in this presentation. I talked about the first movies, just to remind us, because I think if we take a myopic view at what is recent, because I get these questions all the time. What about Black Panther? What about, and then I'm like, well, what about the fact that it's just one movie you're talking to me about, right? And what about it just only came out in the last 3 years? Like, what about, everything beforehand, right? So in other words, you're going to take exception with the exception, right? And so let's look at the overall pattern. And so the overall pattern was, well, it's difficult to digest, Jennifer. Many people in society just did not believe in this thing called equality. They just did not. I mean, it was just a fact. Blacks were less than, and the science proved it at the time, if that's what you want to call it. The religion helped to substantiate it. I mean, the rationale's been all over the place. And so I just want to ground our readers in this milieu that African Americans were trapped by these thought processes that I conveniently shorthand and call the unholy trinity. Very briefly, romantic racialism, negrophobia, and femininity, right? And romantic racialism essentially refers to this idea that I love Black people so long as they stay in their place, right? So one example would be LeBron James. I love that boy. He can dunk the ball like nobody's business. But then he says something about Black Lives Matter. Then it's like, boy, shut up and dribble, right? I mean, that's what Laura Ingraham said. She literally said, shut up and dribble. The minute he wants to actually have, what we say? Thoughts, ideas, feelings, aspirations. Oh, what are you doing? Just keep dribbling that basketball, then we're good. That's romantic racialism, right? This idea that Blacks were actually superior in certain contexts, but within this limited condescending context. Like, they're so good at religion and they're so good at nurturing, so therefore I need you to be the help. Femininity also was like an abstraction of this. this idea that it's bizarre and perverse, but bear with me. The races were anthropomorphized to genders. So the white race was the male race, and therefore they were good at economy, logic, law, that sort of deal. And the black race, whether you were male or female, you were genuinely positioned to be a nurturer and a carer. So that would explain this rationale for the enslavement piece, right? But and that also explains why many black males who were accepted early in American film were largely emasculated. And if you want an example, that would be Theodore Monroe, Andrew Lincoln Perry, otherwise known as Stepin Fetchit. The whole premise was this idea that he humbled himself. He, did arched his back. He emasculated himself. It wasn't like, cannons to the left of me. What's going on, right? And if anything, that's maybe one of the reasons why maybe hip hop when it first came out was so very difficult for many people to take in, because you have black people in your face. They actually believe in themselves. They're assertive. They're confident. If anything, they're cocky. What is going on? Take that chain off your neck. Why are you spending all that money on a chain? Meanwhile, do we tell corporations not to spend thousands of dollars on ice sculptures that have liquor coming out of certain body parts? That's all fun. Right? We don't tell the corporation how to spend their money, but yet you're going to tell this black man not to wear a chain because, he's linked this idea that if you value the chain, then you might value my life. Right? If you value this material object, then you might value my life, right? Because obviously, if I'm unarmed and handcuffed and lying on my stomach, that doesn't mean anything to an officer named Derek Chauvin. But the last point is, when we talk about Negrophobia, this was essentially a shorthand excuse with which to give license to white aggression, typically white male aggression. And so here's the premise. The premise was Black people were oppressed, wrongfully so. And the minute that Blacks have the opportunity to equalize matters, they're going to terrorize us. So if I even flash my teeth and even show a scintilla or hint of anger, now I'm justified in squashing or quashing that because of the fear of all this Black rage that's going to come down on me. It's perverted, I know, but Negrophobia essentially explains this whole lynching craze, right? Let's not overlook how in the Equal Justice Institute, as founded by Brian Stevenson, author of Just Mercy, the book was better than the movie, by the way, and also winner of the MacArthur Grant, Genius Grant. He started this Equal Justice Initiative, and also he started the Memorial of Peace and Justice out in Montgomery, Alabama, otherwise known as the Lynching Museum. You can look it up online and see for yourself some of the arcane and just absolutely imbecilic and idiotic, inane reasons for why people lost their lives, from brushing upon people, for trying to catch a train, from knocking on the wrong door. I say this to say that Negrophobia helped explain this, right? Because of this fear of lascivious, licentious Black men who wanted to ravish all white women, a mere knocking on the door, a mere touching of a woman while I'm trying to catch a train, is somehow, in that idea of the Emmett Till. And now I need to exterminate you, which justifies that. So that's Negrophobia. And just to wrap up my answer, all three of those together were woven into the fabric, unfortunately, of many of the movies. We talked about Birth of a Nation, or even after that, many movies, and also it framed, the educational system by which many movie writers and directors would then see Black images and how they decided to stylize them. That's why when you look at the 19 winners, there's not that much variance in terms of individuals who are able to substantively challenge the status quo when it comes to power and control.
Well, and I thought it was interesting, and you kind of already said this towards the end, but one of the kind of sentences I had highlighted was the one about if, you said you only said 3 names when you said this time, but there was a couple of more, but if Denzel Washington and Viola Davis, if they're all in a car together and something happens, there's 1/4 to 1/2 of all the winners who are now gone. And I think that's really interesting. Do you think that the same people are nominated over and over again because they're a known quantity?
Well, it kind of goes hand in hand. I mean, I think that they're good at what they do, right? Maybe with the exception of Morgan Freeman. I mean, most of those people, I think they're really good at what they do. Morgan Freeman's just good at being old. I mean, think about it. Glory, he was old back then in the movie Glory. It's just, whatever. But the idea is that, he has a nice mellifluous voice. Okay, I get it. But the idea is that they're good at what they do. So the idea that, Meryl Streep, we love to see her again. So there's nothing odd there. But I think it just speaks to this idea that Hollywood is so reticent and reluctant to invest in new opportunities and new talent. I think that's the larger issue, right? And so it's just been slim pickings in terms of, well, why is Denzel pretty much like the only one who can actually helm a movie on his own? I mean, maybe Michael B. Jordan is starting to climb into that space, through the whole Creed series, perhaps. But we'll see. I mean, I still think there's a whole lot more room, for Hollywood to explore. And so I think I'm encouraged by the Hulus of the world, the Netflixes of the world, the Amazon Primes of the world. But I think the rub on that, Jennifer, is you actually have more opportunity to play with ideas, right? Think about how if you have 8 episodes over a course of a season, or even multiple seasons, how you can experiment, try aspects, develop a character, take your time with it, see what the reaction is, as opposed to Avatar, 3 hours or less to get it right. It's $400 million riding on it. And so what's ironic is, even though Hollywood is known as this creative liberal space, ironically, when it comes to like the big tentpole movies, the greater the investment, typically the more conservative these producers become with respect to their casting decisions. It's absolutely ironic.
Yeah, I think it's something you hear a lot about too, right? Like, in some ways, it's the same movie over and over again. I mean, and it's not something we haven't heard before.
No, you're right. Well, I like to call it same but different.
Yeah. All right, so we're a little over on time, so I'm going to ask you one last question, and I think we'll be good we'll be done for the evening. Are you working on anything new?
Oof. Okay. Technically, yes, in the sense that I am chair of TCU's Race and Reconciliation Initiative. And for any Fort Worthians who are interested in what goes on in the Purple Palace, you're more than welcome to check out what is happening online, because that is definitely a project into itself in terms of how to make race a practical conversation for all. And so, it's definitely been a learning process that is, part of the labor of love. I mean, you figure I deal with a lot of theory in the book, and I try to apply it to actual movies and things of that nature. But here is the test. Here's where the rubber hits the road as far as real people, with real variance and perspectives and variance and experiences. And the question is that I'm grappling with, Jennifer, is how do we come together so we can move forward together, right? So that's what I'm working on right now. And so I do have a research opportunity lined up this summer. You asked. And so I was fortunate to be recipient of a fellowship at the National Gallery of Art. And my next book project will be about Black statues and what they stand to tell us about race in the capital space. Dun, 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 dun. So to the extent that we get that book up and running, maybe we can circle back, Jennifer, and do this again sometime.
Yes. So thank you very much for joining us. And I want to thank everyone who came tonight and spent the evening with us. If you are interested in purchasing Dr. G's book, there are copies at the Dock Bookshop here in Fort Worth. It's one of our local independents, and this is their contact information. They are open. You can go in and buy the book. You can order it online and have it shipped to you. And they have also been providing the books for all of our adult authors that we've been hosting. So check that out. And thank you very much for coming, and have a nice evening.
And I'll just say, just keep watching what you're watching.
Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.